Hi, everyone. This is Andrea Quagenti. I'm here with a guest from the Self-Directed Education Group on Facebook, and we're excited to talk and share some information on self-directed education and some of the learning centers in the United States. Yeah, do you want to introduce yourself, Stephen?
Yeah, my name is Stephen Slaughter, and recently back from Kenya, relocating back to Chicago, and on a journey searching for where I fit in next in the educational world, which feels a lot like it's going to be in a self-directed space.
Awesome. Great. Yeah, this is one of my favorite topics, so I appreciate your time. So we've done a couple of these, and usually we start with just a gentle meditation so that we can be present and more relaxed and clear. So we'll start with that. If you can put both feet on the floor and uncross your arms or legs so that you're just kind of open and relaxed. And if you're comfortable, we can close our eyes gently. And we'll start with just 3 deep breaths, breathing in and out, breathing in and out. One more time, in and out. We can allow any stress and tension to fall away. We let go of the past. We let go of the future. And we call all of our attention to the present moment, to the here and now, where we can speak clearly and listen with all of our attention. So we become more relaxed. We can let go of any more tension or stress by breathing it away and coming to our true self. We can start to come back into the room as we wiggle our fingers and toes. We can start to open our eyes gently and welcome ourselves to this wonderful conversation. Awesome. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So we had a chance to chat for a few minutes, and if you want to just kind of tell your story, what led you to self-directed education. Sometimes I use the term unschooling. Are you comfortable if I swap those in and out?
Sure. Yeah. Unschooling. And when I say it, I might be thinking more of narrower sense of just the act of not having a curriculum.
Okay.
For a child to not have a curriculum. And then, so yeah, that's a form of self-directed education. And then the kind of areas that I've been looking at bring kids together in sort of some structured ways to do that together. So those are kind of I'll probably use those terms in that way a little bit. But yes, unschooling.
Awesome. Yeah, I just personally, I like the term self-directed education a little bit better because I think it, I should have wrote down the definition, but just what I see as self-directed education is not having a set curriculum and instead allowing children to naturally be in the present moment and open to discovering and learning about passions that come up. Or if they do have something that they want to take a class on, it's something that's driven from the student and not from the teacher. So basically student-led as opposed to teacher-led is how I describe it. But why don't you give it, I'm sure your definition will be better too, because I don't have an education background and I know you do, so.
Yeah, no, it's similar. Yeah, I think I prefer it because as well, mostly because of the negative sense of like not schooling, and it almost, that I don't know, for some people maybe that can seem kind of antisocial or oppositional to something, like I'm in opposition to schooling, And it's, for me, it's really more um, about trust and about honoring young people as humans who have some rights to self-determination, and some right to make decisions for themselves. The more I've been in regular classrooms, the more I realize how much or how little agency young people have in their life at all. Even teenagers who have very little choice in what they're doing, how they're spending most of their time. And they feel it. They feel this sense of, like, it drives their sense of meaninglessness in much of what they're doing, because it isn't meaningful to them often, you know? Um, so yeah, my backstory a little bit, real fast and zip through it. I graduated college in 1990 with a degree in design. I did kind of marketing design, illustration, eventually web design, where it moved more toward the web. I like the creativity of that work, but I felt like it was lacking. I just felt, did something happen with the sound?
It's something is when you move your hand, I'm just hearing like a little bit of static.
Oh, okay. I'll stop. I'll try not to talk with my hands.
Yeah, and I got a beep, but we're good otherwise.
Okay. So yeah, so I did that for about 10 years on my own, and I just felt like it wasn't fulfilling. And then at that time, my daughter got into first grade at a public school here in Chicago. I started volunteering with the 7th grade tech class, working on the school website. And every time the bell would ring and the kids would pack, grab their bags and go, I would feel this sinking feeling of just like this realization that I had to go back to the world of adults again. And I didn't want to do that. Like, I just felt really kind of sad. A lot of times people walk with, if any adult like got airlifted and dropped in the middle of a hallway, like in an elementary school, many people would be like overwhelmed with the chaos of it, or the noise or whatever of children. And
Mhm.
it's like New York City streets. Like, I fed on the energy. I loved it.
Okay.
And um, so that was just kind of a sign to me, that because I was looking for like what's next.
Mhm.
And I realized, like, I just want to be with kids all day. This is where I want to spend my time. And so I did a program through something called the Golden Apple Foundation, which partnered with Northwestern University's graduate program of education, and it was a fast track program for career changers. So I was in my 30s at that point, and it's like a 1-year program, and throughout that program, you start teaching kind of provisionally, and then you get your full certification once you complete it. So it was a really, really challenging year, but it got me into the classroom. So I taught for 8 years in a Chicago public school. It was a high achieving school. It was a well-run school. I have nothing but respect for the people that run it and the heroic fight that they fought. But it still was a public school, so it had all the problems of that. I started with first grade, and then I moved to 5th grade. I had 37 and 38 first graders in my classroom when I taught that. And yeah, I mean, for anybody who's got a couple kids, getting their mittens and hats and coats and stuff on can feel like a lot of work. Imagine doing that with 37 kids. But yeah, I would fall asleep on the bus routinely after that on my way home, because it was just like super exhausting. But I loved it, and I still do. There's nowhere I'd rather spend my time, and it is than with kids. So after 8 years, I ended up just getting this opportunity through a friend, an awareness of a job opening as a middle school English teacher in Nairobi, Kenya, at an international school. And my wife had this long-term dream of living in Africa ever since going to Zimbabwe in college for just a short trip in the summer.
Mhm.
So this was really the way to get her back there, because it was this dream that she had. It's telling me my internet is okay. The internet okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It's
All right, good. I had a warning thing on the screen. But yeah, so it was as much to give her that opportunity that she had long dreamed of. And I was the kind of the mechanism to get her there as a teacher. So initially it was a 3-year contract. We knew that it would really change our kids' lives as well. They had always lived in the same house and in the same neighborhood, and the same school. Everything was the same. And suddenly everything was changing. And we really value the diversity of a city like Chicago. Going to this school in Kenya was, there were over 50 countries represented in the student body, about 650 kids, K through 12. So we loved it there. We raised our kids there, and they were starting 4th, 6th, and 9th grade. So we went all the way up from our youngest being in 4th to our 2 older kids graduating, and then finally this last year, our youngest graduating. And we decided it was time to head back. So about a year ago, I started thinking, like, what's next for me? What kind of school do I want to be in? So it really began as a search for how can I find a school that aligns more with the kind of things that I have found to be the most valuable. One of the things, so I taught 1st, 5th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 11th, and 12th grade. So all the way up. And I think everything that I did, as I reflected on it, that I felt like was really valuable and so kind of transformative for kids, were things that involved giving the kids some choice and some agency, some decision making. So one example of that, when I was doing 8th grade, we did a thing called the 20% project, my teaching partner and I, in social studies, and I was teaching English, and we gave them a day a week to do, for a whole semester, to do a big project. It didn't have to do with either of our subjects. It just had to be hard, like a challenge for them. And kids learned how to sew and design clothes and write novels and build motorcycles and just a whole bunch of stuff. And then when I was teaching 12th grade, like these last few years, last year I was working on the first assignment was a writing project doing their college entrance essays. And a couple of the kids had, in their essay, talked about, when I was in 8th grade, I was finally given the chance to do something that I cared about, which set me off on this journey. And so now, there was a girl that was writing her letter to a school to become a fashion designer. That's what she wants to pursue. And she got that opportunity when she was 14 and learned about that love, like nurtured it and cultivated it because she was given the time and the opportunity. So that's just one thing. And there's been a bunch of them, but it's always been kind of an uphill climb, because I had to try to squeeze that stuff in between the required curriculum.
Okay.
And so I kind of wondered, like, maybe I need to do something kind of Montessori-ish or something like that. And I didn't know a ton about that. So I started looking into it. And it was only then that I discovered, like, there are schools where kids do that all the time. Like, they have full reign over their lives. And that kind of blew my mind, and it still sort of does. And so I guess the place that I am right now, and we'll talk about the trip and stuff and the journey that I'm on now, but just, I guess, like, as philosophically, I've been going through these questions of, like, how much freedom do I really believe kids should have? Like, and I'm not fully 100% like, yes, 100% completely self-run quite yet. I feel like I probably will get there. But the teacher in me still, I guess, is holding on to some things like, well, but yeah, what about something, like being a good reader, for instance, like, opens up a ton of doors. So if a kid didn't want to do it, I don't know. I guess I still feel like there's things that adults know, just from our life experience.
Yeah.
I would want to, certain schools, like, don't even allow the adults to even offer things unless a kid asks. And yeah, I'm not quite there yet, but I love so much about the things that I've been learning about.
Yeah. Your volume went down a little bit. I wonder if your is this something?
Should I put on the headphones and try that?
Oh, this is better right now. You just went up again. Yes.
Oh, all right. So let's see. What do we want to talk about next?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. It gives us, it's mind blowing, and like I told you, and it's probably good for anyone listening, that I discovered self-directed education about 9 years ago, and I was blown away too. And it took me quite a while to be like, wait a minute, they're gonna need some direction, and so it's been a process for me over 9 years of researching it. But I think what really sold me was when I saw the kids doing it. So when my daughter went to Montessori, she was 4, and they had 3-hour segments of self-direction at 4 years old. So, and they're mixed age. So there were 4, 5, and 6-year-olds all in the same classroom. And the children, even the 4-year-olds, like my daughter, were focused for those 3 hours, all independently. You know, they could come to the teacher if they needed help, but the teacher was also helping the other 14 kids in the class, so they'd have to, you know, be really respectful. And at the time, my sister is a public school teacher just in the Boston area, and she said, well, children can only pay attention to their age. So a 4-year-old can really only focus for 4 minutes. And so that's what my sister told me. And then I went to Montessori and saw, I was so interested. I was volunteering, and I actually ran a meditation program at the school, which was just so great. But then I would see 4-year-olds focused for 3 hours. And I said, well, what? So anyways, yeah, long story short, seeing it, I was like, oh my God, this works, you know, and then later seeing it at the actual Sudbury school in Sudbury, Mass. So anyways, yeah, so I understand that process, and a lot of people call it deschooling. So that process of changing the mindset from a traditional teacher-led approach, and then you can go all the way to, and that's probably something else that I think is good for me to just say, you know, put out there, is that there's all different degrees of self-direction. So you can start, I would say that the gentlest would be like a Montessori, and then you can get into a Sudbury, and then you can get into learning environments, and you can go all the way to radical unschooling, where children are not coached or even given any guidelines from bedtime to nutrition, anything. So there's all different levels of freedom, and there's all different levels of self-directed. And I didn't start way at complete freedom, and we're not even operating like that now. So for me personally, just me and my family, which is me and my daughter, we're kind of in the middle. You know, we're a little bit more free than a Montessori style, but we're not radical unschoolers. So anyways, you know, I think that that's important just to get out there, because I think some people go from only knowing traditional schooling to being like, oh my God, now we're going to have no curriculum, no bedtime, no food, you know, like it's, yeah. So there are different levels of.
Yeah. So even in some of the centers that I visited that have no set curriculum, so like structurally, they're kind of on that outer edge. Many of the kids will have an agreement with their parents, kind of dialing that back, right? So the school doesn't impose it or coerce, but you know, the parents still operate within what they believe is good for their kids. So it's this partnership that's going on.
I love that. I love it. You know, partnership, agreements. So we're not talking about rules or punishments, rewards. We're talking about negotiating agreements with children. So it's much more, you're really honoring the child as an equal soul, rather than the parent, or the elder is above and then the student is lower. You know, it's really, that's the way I picture it, is it's there. You're talking about an equal partnership of 2 equal souls, rather than a top-down approach. Okay, so yeah, so then the exciting part, so thank you for joining the group. And so you got interested in this, it blew your mind, and you went on a tour and you visited a lot of centers on the East Coast, which is where I am. So yeah, tell us about that. That's so awesome.
Yeah, so I was similar to what you said earlier about like, I need to see it in person. Stepping back a little bit, so I was back, it was probably like I don't know, January or something of this last year. So almost a year ago. I started really realizing like, I guess I need to just do a deep dive study on this for myself. And right around that time, I was listening to a podcast. There's a great podcast by a guy named Blake Boles. I don't know if you all know him, but you should check him out. It's Off Trail Learning. And he interviews a lot of great people in this world, like great interviews. And he's got some books as well. So definitely recommend his work.
Okay.
But one of the things so I started just researching and reading everything I could and watching TED Talks and whatnot. And then I listened to one of his interviews, and I reached out to, it was a woman in Houston, Texas, who was running a center. And I reached out to her, and then she said, actually, we're looking at starting a group for kind of people like you. So it was a class that was starting a course, a 6-month course, all online. And it was a group of like 4 leaders with maybe 15 or 16 interested people, parents and teachers and folks that are just interested in this. So that was awesome, because it not only gave me this knowledge and lots of resources, but it also just helped me start to build into the community, which is so important, and just developing relationships, people that you could call with questions and stuff.
Mhm.
So toward the end of that, I said, the one missing piece is that I haven't seen this in action with kids actually doing it.
Can we just
and I
take
threw
a
out
step back for just a second? I just want to put it out there, because you had told me earlier. So you took a 6-month class called Another Way. Oh, I can't hear you.
No?
Oh,
You can't
now I
hear?
can.
It's called Another Way, and
Okay.
I don't know if it's going to be a continual 6-month course, but I think the next one they decided to do a 3-month course. But yeah, you can look them up as well.
Okay.
They're I can try to find the links and stuff for you as well.
Yeah, I can, once we're finished, we can communicate, and just get all the links. Because once
Right.
I upload this to YouTube, this will be, a resource for people. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'll put the links in after.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So the last piece. So during one of our last sessions, I said, I wonder if I could. It'd be fun to start, because I've been thinking about starting a podcast. I've taught podcasting and stuff with my students in the past, and I love podcasts. So I've always wondered if it would be fun to create one. And so I said, what would it be like to do a podcast where the kids really have front and center, where I speak to the kids involved in this.
Okay.
We're talking about these systems that honor children, and yet a lot of what we're doing is kind of doing theory and practice talk among adults and practitioners. But it's about kids and honoring them. So so I bought some equipment that I could take on the road, and fitted out my Subaru to be a little car camper, and decided to head east, and called a bunch of people and asked if I could come and visit. So I really planned on 2 trips, and I still may do one through the South later on, but because there's still a few places I really want to see in person. But I did get a really good taste of it. So just to give you a quick kind of snapshot through. And then I also added in some time with a couple of people that weren't really exactly directly part of this, but so I stopped in Ithaca, New York, to meet a guy named Rusty Keeler, who designs adventure playgrounds, which are really like spiritual cousins to SDE learning centers, I think.
Wow.
Those are just awesome. Like there's one in New York City, and the one in Ithaca is great. Basically, it's a bunch of loose parts. It's a bunch of like loose stuff that kids are building and constructing themselves. So
I've heard. Okay.
they're super fun. Yeah.
Okay.
And like you were saying about the Montessori and the attention, the kids will just play and play and play there like forever. Whereas in a normal playground, they'll just like run their course and get bored after 20 minutes. He even said he had a PhD project that was done about that exact question, like how engaging that activity is of the kids building their own little world here. So I interviewed him first. Then I interviewed another guy in Ithaca named Matt, who is going to be starting a center there. He's in the process of that. He was in a training that I did for Agile learning centers. I did a 1-week summer training as well. So the two organizations or networks, I guess is the good word for it, that I'm most interested in are Agile learning centers, and they tend to work more with younger kids. And then Liberated Learners, which is a group more in the Northeast, and this is more on teenagers. and they each kind of have a different sort of approach, but they're not too far away from each other, I guess. So after that, I went to meet with a woman who was in that Another Way course with me, named Heather in Albany. And she and her family have been unschooling since COVID started. They just launched into unschooling. And they're actually thinking of relocating so that they can be close to a center, because they just feel like their kids could really benefit from that kind of rich environment rather than just doing it on their own. So I had a fun conversation with their family out on her front porch. And then, so all these are in the podcast and stuff too, which I'm finishing editing now. And I can share this with you too.
Awesome.
But, and then I went to Northstar, out of Amherst. That's Ken Danford's learning center. And it's really like the oldest one that I know of. It was started in 1996. And so it's been running for 25 years. And so yeah, that's a pretty great place, and it was a really fun. Spent a day and a half there, and I just finished editing my interview with 3 kids from there, and just listening to it again was really just enjoyable to hear. Not really just enjoyable the whole time. Sometimes it was really troubling, hearing their backstories. I'll get more into that as well, but I'll finish out the flow.
Okay.
I popped down to Holyoke, Mass, and talked with Catherine at Lighthouse Holyoke. The kids weren't there that afternoon, unfortunately, but hers is an interesting program because it's kind of half like Northstar, where kids are just kind of independently doing their own thing with supportive adults. But she also has a component where she's serving the public school system and kids who aren't working well in that. So it's a really interesting kind of crossbreed of those two things. I included some family time visiting my in-laws in Connecticut, and then I visited 2 more places, Princeton Learning Cooperative in Princeton, New Jersey, which is another liberated learners, and then in Philadelphia, the Philly ALC Agile Learning Center there. So those were the places that I got to visit on this trip. I wanted to visit a few others, but they were closed to visitors for different reasons, so I couldn't catch those. But the main thing about liberated learners was that just structurally, when parents or when families come to visit, Ken is fond of just telling them, like, they will often have a story about how school isn't working for them. That's why they're there. And because many of them are coming from that, they're not already coming from another like SDE kind of space.
Okay.
So he'll just tell them, you never have to go back. Like today or yesterday could be the last day you ever need to go to school. You're not required to be in school. You get registered as a homeschooler with the state, and then you come here as much as you want, as much as we can help you. They think of it more as like a resource center, more like a YMCA or a library, rather than a school, because kids aren't compelled to come on a particular day. Some of them work or have internships, but they all have a mentor that helps them kind of find their way in life. What do you want to do? What's important to you? I can help you because I know people or know some things or can teach a class or do things that you need. Yeah. And that's kind of the culture of those spaces.
Awesome. And, I think that this is just a good point because we may get people watching this that are new to this. And, every country has different homeschool laws, but in the United States, you can literally stop. You can take your child out of school, and then you have to just do the paperwork to register your child as a homeschooler. So if there is really adverse things happening, if children I've heard a lot of stories too, just because I've been in this, I'll call it alternative, this alternative world. You do not have to continue to send your child to school. You can stop and then just, figure out what the paperwork is required for your city, your town, your state. So that's a really good point. Luckily,
that's important.
Yeah, and most other countries have similar laws. Just look into the homeschool, but you can, there is no time frame. If there's a problem, you can literally stop sending your child and get the paperwork in, or even just let the school know, I'm in the process of doing my homeschool paperwork. My child will not be attending, and the paperwork will be in as soon as possible. And then you can give yourself some time to get that taken care of.
Yeah, and it's different in different states
Right.
in terms of like what they require.
Right.
I have relatives in Pennsylvania, and they had I think they had to create a portfolio and show that to reps from the state every year, just so that they knew that the kids weren't, being working in a factory or something, but we're actually learning things. But yeah, and then other states are really, really laissez-faire about it and don't hardly check in with what you're
Yeah,
doing.
some states in the USA do not require any paperwork, just a couple. Massachusetts is kind of a middle ground where it's really easy. I thought it was going to be harder, but it's a 2-page letter, and I just used this. There's a standard letter, and I just customized it. Literally only took a couple minutes. And then in Massachusetts, you can either choose a progress report at the end of the year, or you can give work samples. And I've picked the progress report, which is another 1-page, very, very simple, concise. And it's been going great. Very easy. And I have a great relationship with our town. My daughter, this is kind of getting a little bit off track, but just to give some practical information, my daughter is in 3rd grade, she's 8, and she just decided that the option in our town is she can go into the public school for the extracurriculars, which are art, gym, or music. So she could choose one of those, and she chose gym. She actually just went today for the first time. So I drop her off. She goes in for 45 minutes. I pick her back up. So anyways, but that, that's a little bit unique, but there's all types of ways to structure this. I know homeschooling can seem really heavy and really confusing and seem like you need. I don't come from an education background. I have a business background, but for me, it was really easy. So I think it's good for parents to know that setting your child up to homeschool in the United States is an easy process.
Yeah.
And it can be done
Yeah,
very quick.
Yeah. And so if you're doing it on your own like that, it's not hard, but it's even easier if you were going to a center like that, because that's one of the things that they know all about that. So part of what they do is they help you through that whole process as well, because that's part of kind of what they do, is helping people extract themselves from that. So for anything if you're intimidated from the state perspective, that can be helpful as well. The other thing I think about like creating a portfolio, that can be really helpful and not just burdensome. But even if you didn't have to do it, I would encourage people to do it, because it becomes this sort of documentation. If you're thinking ahead, maybe to university, if your child ends up deciding to want to go to college, that becomes kind of a form of a transcript. In the back of Ken Danford's book, he's got some samples of like real student transcripts, sort of, more like a portfolio. Here's what I've been doing. And I think many people are, if they're afraid, especially if their kids are older and they're already thinking about the future and will this ruin my kid's chance of getting to college or whatever, they have higher, I think Northstar has a higher percentage of kids that go to college than the general population in that area.
Oh, that's
so
good to know.
it doesn't diminish it at all. The kids tend to be more creative in their pursuits or interests, more artistic often, but not exclusively. One of the kids I was interviewing wants to be a mechanic or design cars, like an engineer. And so, yeah, so having the portfolio, if we think about like a high school transcript to a high school, I've been a high school teacher most recently, so that's what I'm thinking about. When we think of like a traditional high school transcript come side by side with the transcript of a kid who's been driving their own education, oftentimes the self-directed learner's portfolio will be way more interesting, and I think way more interesting and compelling to a college admissions person, because, and the main reason why is because one of the things that college admissions people are looking at is self-direction. Like, they want to know, when you go to college and you don't have your parents pestering you to finish homework and stuff, like, you can fail out because nobody's there to like crack the whip, you know, you have to do it for yourself. One of the things that they're looking at is like, are you a person who can handle the work? Are you a person that can like take things on that are hard? And so if you look at some of these examples, they're incredible, especially when you start to look at like, wait, you read all these books, you read these 40 books in the last 2 years because you were interested, just because you were interested. It wasn't like because it was the assigned reading in the class. When you start bringing self-direction in, it changes everything about like the meaning of that work. As a person who's been a teacher in school, I can tell you that many of the kids just are figuring out how to game the system. You know, like, how can I get away with it out? How can I pass this novel study on Gatsby or whatever without actually reading the book? Like, can
That
I
was
do it?
me.
Yeah,
That was
exactly.
me. That was
Lots
this.
of us.
I just wanted to
Lots of
get by. I didn't really care much about the information, the curriculum. I was just like, what do I just need? I just want to do the least I can and just get through this, get the grade, and go have fun with my friends.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think one of the things that I think, as I'm thinking about this, and I've been describing it over and over to people that I meet and I talk to, and they ask me what I'm doing. One of the things, whenever objections are raised, well, what about this compared to conventional school? What I think what they're off, the mistake that people are making is that they're comparing it to an idealization of school, not the way school really works for real people, real kids. You know what I mean? So, for example, like we just talked about with the novel study, when we say, well, if we don't make kids read the novel, they'll just screw around and they won't do anything. As opposed to like sitting in the class and going through and learning all the novel by like, well, a lot of them aren't reading the novel anyway in regular school, you know. Or like, I've asked a number of kids. I remember asking some seniors, they had just gotten back this chem test after a couple weeks after it was this big chemistry exam, and they were comparing notes about their grades and stuff. And I said, so if you had to take that test again today, how would you do? And they laugh. They always laugh when you ask that question. They're like, oh, I'd fail it, you know? Because all I did, and we all did this, didn't we? Like, I put it into flash memory. I spat it out on the test. I got my A, hopefully, or if I could, and then I forgot it. It's gone,
Right.
you know? And so if we're talking about learning, then we have to really be honest about what learning really is in conventional senses. And if it's just like learning so that I can put it on the test and then like quickly forget it, how can we really call that any kind of authentic kind of learning? But the minute you sort of take that coercion piece away, and that sort of like jump through our hoops for us, you don't have to jump through any hoops anymore. Like, what do you want to learn? What do you care about?
Right.
Then kids will actually do it. I had an 8th grader when I did that project who hated reading novels. He was a really snarky kind of kid, and he's like, what's the point of novels and fiction? And he just didn't like any of the novels we did. I couldn't get him to read. And I'm an English teacher. I love reading. And then he was building this motorcycle, and he was reading tech manuals about like how do you rebuild engines and stuff. He was reading those because why? Because those mattered to him. Like, that kind of reading was important to him. So he gladly read it because it was interesting, you know. And so I just think that we have this idealized idea of what school is like and what are kids going to miss, when in actuality, like, a lot of that is just fear driven, or it's idealized versions of what learning is in school when it's not that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. So, just to kind of take a step back a little bit. So, you went on a tour of self-directed learning centers. So what's just, just in case there's any newbies or just to kind of, so what were any of them actual schools, or were all of them learning centers that hosted homeschoolers?
Yeah, so the Princeton one and the and Northstar and Lighthouse are all are all learning centers of
Okay.
homeschoolers, except for that one component, that public component to Lighthouse.
Okay.
The ALCs often will call themselves a school
Okay.
of some kind. I mean, they'll describe themselves that way, I guess, because they do meet 5 days a week. The Liberated Learner Center is like, it's an open campus. You can come and go as you want.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to kind of, for any listeners, just to kind of, show the difference. But yeah, so now you've seen, a great group of kids voluntarily going to school, voluntarily, learning what they want to learn. And you must be just, I'm sure your mind was blown on how much information they can gobble up so quickly. So this happens a lot in the unschooling world of the self-directed learning, is that what might take a traditional student in a traditional school 12 years, to get to the 12th level, let's say someone loves chemistry, you can have a child gobble up that information in like 6 months because they're so into it and they're actually learning and retaining. Have you seen some of those scenarios where you're just like mind blown at how quickly they can learn? And then when you compare it to traditional, how slow that can be?
Yeah, totally. I mean, so much of it is your motivation, right? Because, so yeah, one of the kids I was interviewing at Northstar, Noah, was saying that he was 15 and he loves history, and he was really, really bored at the slow pace. He was lamenting about, like, when I was in 4th grade, man, they were just so slow and they wanted to do this and I wanted to study that part of history. I wanted to go deeper, and he was saying now, like, today, he's 15 and he's talking about, like, if I want to take a history class, like, the place that I would go look for the next class would be community college, because that's where I am. Like, that's where he is, just on his own self-study.
Right.
He's just like gone that fast and he can move at his own pace. Yeah, tons of kids, there's a mix of reasons why people elect to go into a center like this, or even just unschool on their own. And some of it, yeah, is boredom, because the pace is so slow on stuff that they don't like, or it's like they have a challenge, a learning challenge, and it's not being really addressed that well, or they're not being taught very successfully with their learning challenge, and so they don't do it at the right time. It's kind of like this machine thinking about humans, where, like, all 5th graders should be able to do this and all 6th graders should be able. Well, some of us are slower than others at different times, and we're all individuals. So
Right.
And we all know that, but yet we then keep we keep assuming that they all can do X, Y, or Z at these different points, when really we learn them at different points and it's fine. Like, Ken has a story in his book about a kid who was, what was it? He had really done badly in math through middle school and really thought of himself as a failure in math. And then he got interested in his mid-teens in music production. He wanted to be in music production. And, in their mentor talks, it was like, well, what do music producers need in their life? What do they need to learn? Well, like, music theory would be a good thing. So he looks on the community college and there's a music theory class, and it's got a prerequisite for a math class that he hadn't taken yet. And so here he is, like, the ghosts of that voice telling him, like, you're bad at math, you're a failure at this. But they said, well, let's try it. I really, really want to take this theory class. So let me jump back in and try to do that. So now he's taking that math class in a concentrated way. He doesn't have to take anything else. So he can spend like 3 hours a day on that.
Yeah.
Instead of it being paced out over a whole school year, like little bit by bit.
Mm-hmm.
And with a mentor and a person who is really good at math to help him, he aces it in like 6 weeks, and so he can then take it to do. So motivation also is just a super important key piece of this too.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point.
Yeah,
I think that that surprised me a lot when I started to look into this, that a lot of, whether you're unschooling at home or self-directed at home, or if you're using a learning center, obviously there's a lot of benefits to using a center. Most of them are self-pay, which can be an obstacle for some families. But anyways, what I realized is that so many homeschooled high schoolers and even junior high are already taking college classes. So you'll have children graduating with a high school diploma and an associate's degree. So it's so funny, because I think that the myth is that homeschoolers are going to be behind. But what's actually happening is that they can go, a lot of them, and this isn't everyone, you know, all children are different. And I think it's important that we honor all different of their motivation and inspiration, and their individual passion. Could be nothing to do with college at all. Maybe they just want to go be on a farm, or, you know, whatever it is that they're passionate about. But to see, you know, high school kids already have the associates under their belt, and then it's, you know, they're only looking at another 2 years before, if they're going that route to be independent. It's that blew my mind.
Yeah, no, totally. And if you start, I mean, a couple of things too about the finances on that. Obviously, you know, if kids are getting that associates completed, in the end, it can be much more cost effective, even if you're out of pocket for that time. The other thing that's important to know too about learning centers, both the Liberated Learners and the ALC network, and I really appreciated this about both of them, are really, really committed to equity and not being just a resource for wealthy people.
Okay.
And so all of them, as far as I know, have sliding scale fees kind of built into their structure. And
Awesome.
so, yeah, so they don't want, you know, and so even that, there's a certain sort of like beauty in the idea that, yeah, if you can afford, if you have a good amount of money to pay the full fee, that is essential to help support people that would otherwise just have no options in this. So yeah, there's some that are paying very little and others that are paying more, but even the ones that are paying more, they're not paying like anything close to the kind of fees that I've seen for, certainly for like elite private schools and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we can, you know, it's right about an hour now. You know, if there's anything else that you feel like, you know, you want to say, I think just on that line, because just because there's not a learning center in my direct area, and I'm comfortable, I was a financial planner, I'm comfortable talking about numbers. So just in my area where I am, I'm north of Boston in Massachusetts. Private schools around here run from 10, 20, 30,000 a year. I know that when I looked into Sudbury, Massachusetts, that was around 10,000 a year, and they did have financial aid for sure. But can you just give me a ballpark? Like if we are looking at, okay, I'm gonna homeschool, because what happens when you homeschool is usually you need a parent, or if the parents can work out at, you know, blend their work schedules. But for someone like me who's a single parent, when I decided to homeschool, that pretty much means that I have to be very creative with how I work and when I work, because now I'm responsible for a child all the time. So that, you know, that requires some creativity for sure. But so when you're talking about a learning center, can you just give me like a ballpark of where they're at? And it's great to know that they do have financial aid and sliding scales.
Yeah. I think I didn't talk a ton about that with them, but I believe that, yeah, that 10,000 was sort of the top end of
Okay.
any of the places that I saw.
Okay.
So, and some people are paying much less than that. You know, they're paying, you know, like a couple thousand maybe, like significantly less, you know. I think the main thing, I guess, a good way to kind of like wrap up as well, a couple of thoughts on the kind of like decision making between going your own way or trying to find, if you can, if you have one close by. And some of these places, because of COVID, created, I think Northstar is doing this. It's not quite the same experience, but they are offering, like, because they went all online, that opened up their work to people that were not geographically close. And I think some of them have continued with that. So
Okay.
that can be like a supplemental piece. And a couple practical pieces about that are that they, many parents, the work kind of commitments and the juggling of that is really hard. And then also just the expertise that somebody may or may not have in different subjects. I reached a point where I could not help my kids in math. I'm an English teacher, and like I got a D in my last math class in high school, and that was the last class I took. So yeah, when my kids hit calculus, I was like useless to them. And so the nice thing about that, whether it was an online form or in person, is that if your kid really wants to take that advanced math class or something, or any subject that you don't know much about, they ask, like, where can I get this? Or can you teach a class? And so the staff there and the volunteers, like, that's part of their job, is to find people. So especially if you're anywhere close to universities, I know that Amherst, like Northstar, and then Princeton also, like, many of their people, their volunteers, are happy to share their knowledge. So they'll be retired professors, or they'll be like really, really much more qualified people sometimes than even the teachers that they might have in the local school too, much less ourselves, who maybe don't know much about a certain. I do think that there's some really great advantage of that. The last thing that I think that I saw on my trip that I felt like was probably the most profound piece, had nothing to do with academics. It had to do with kids finding friends, finding their people. Not all of them, but a number of the kids that I met. And again, this is sort of coming out of COVID time too, which was really hard for lots of us, that were involved in school. So they're just coming off of that and just in person together for the first time, some of them this year. But it was beautiful to see kids who, some of whom had really struggled. There's one segment of the kids who do attend these learning centers. The reason that school didn't work for them was that they were bullied, sometimes terribly, or they had, some were just bored, were unchallenged, but a number of them just had challenges. They were unhappy, like fundamentally they were unhappy.
Mhm.
And the social life of middle and high school, maybe elementary too now, is brutal for a lot of kids. It's really, really hard. And so it was amazing seeing kids who had found their people, who had found their friends, and I loved it. And I thought that, and the kids that I interviewed talked about this. They're just like, there was this relief that they felt, this sense of like, I can be myself here. I can be fully myself, and nobody's going to like call me names or make fun of me or mock me or bully me. I can be fully myself for the first time sometimes. And if we want to talk to, circling back to like the nature of learning, how much learning can you do when you're feeling terrified all day long of the social climate of your school? When you're clinically depressed, when you're just whatever. I mean, when you are like overcome with all of that other stuff, the social components, which can often be really, really debilitating, you're not learning anything. So I thought that I loved so much about what I saw there, where kids told me these stories of like, I mean, they literally said, a girl told me, like, there's a good chance that I would not be alive today if I had been forced to stay in that place, because I was at such a low point. And the freedom to go at my own pace, the being known for who I really am and being appreciated for who I am, all of these pieces. She was an actress, and so she had like time to do that in community theater or even at the local high school. Like, all those pieces made her life manageable, made her life happy, maybe for the first time in a long time. And so it's pretty I don't know, like, it was heartwarming to,
Yeah.
And I think above all the other things like that, I just think it makes sense in a lot of ways. The idea of like creating a space where kids can find themselves and their people, and acceptance, to free them to really be themselves and to learn. That's what I think compels me the most right now. I just feel like it was a beautiful thing to see.
Awesome. Well, I can talk to that because that, after I was in business and I was working with people, I had some challenges in life, and that kind of set me on a spiritual wellness path. So now I teach meditation and mindfulness, and I'm very much into whole health. So from an unschooling, homeschooling, self-directed learning centers, it is so much more of a healthy lifestyle for the children and also for the parents, and there's so many different aspects from, when you do homeschool or if you are involved in, a learning center, you can be on your own sleep schedule. So that's huge, right? Allowing children to sleep their full needed. The nutrition also usually improves because you're not required to only eat and drink at certain times. So your nutrition, and then the social aspect, all of that stress and pressure. So we know you don't even need to be a wellness or a meditation teacher to know that anyone who's under stress or in fight or flight is not learning anything, right? So when you're in a panic or stressed mentality, you're not absorbing and you're not really able to open up and relax and be yourself. So you hit on a great point, is that I have noticed really awesome relationships, because now I've been homeschooling for 3 years, and the children are, you can see a new family come to our park days, and you can see the child, they're looking stressed, and the children who are homeschooled are like, come on in, come play. And very quickly you can see the stress let go. And I think that what I've noticed is that children that are not under stress and pressure of grades and things like that, they're so much more friendly. They're naturally nurturing. I'm noticing my daughter taking a lead with some of the younger children. They're naturally, the natural nurturing kindness comes out once the stress and pressure is relieved. You've just got great heart-centered kids that want to be helpful. They want to help other children. And once they're relaxed and calm and feel supported, then they can say, you know what? I mean, I've never even thought about this, but what I really like doing is, whatever it is, if it's design or acting. But if a child is under a lot of stress and tension, they're not even able to access those parts of them that are heart-centered because they're shelled. So that might be my biggest reason, just because of my own health issues, for why I chose this. And my daughter loves it as well. So I'm a big component in when I say child-led or self-directed, I mean, what does each individual child want to do? So if the child says, I want to go to public school, I'm okay with that. The pressure doesn't get to me. That's where I thrive. Go ahead. Or if the child says, I want to be homeschooled, I need my sleep. If I don't sleep, I'm not learning anything. So there's all different ways to structure it, but the benefits are really, there are a lot of benefits for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the parent-child relationship as well, I mean, you kind of touched on this, is huge, and I heard that again and again too, about, even as a parent, who had kids in a conventional school, what were the conflicts, that we dealt with?
Mhm.
A lot of it was over homework, like, kind of pestering them to get their work done if they were wasting time, or like a lot of, I guess with teenagers, a lot of conflicts kind of can come down to that. And yeah, so a lot of these kids, like, especially when the kids, some students I found are like, they come off, or they are perceived as being troublemakers or problematic. What they really are people that are like fiercely honest, and they're unwilling to like accept nonsense. And so, and they're not you can't intimidate them into doing it or bully them. So like, if they really think like, what is the point of me to like doing this, taking this class? I see no value to me. I'm not going to do the work. Like, we think of that kid as really oppositional, but, or are they just being, you know, like, we often can't give them a really good answer for why they should do that, other than because I said so, you know? So again, it's this power differential, you know? And so like, you take away the power differential, and kids who were fighting suddenly don't have anything to fight against because we're just fully on their side. And so yeah, like all those kinds of like whole body, whole mind kind of benefits can emerge when we let go of the fear that and it is a lot of fear, I think, that's driving them. I think the main thing I would just encourage, one more thing though about that, like when I know we're going a little long, but you mentioned deschooling. And one of the things that any parent who is going to dive into this or is going to really give it a shot, an important thing to know is that deschooling is real. And what I mean by that is that process, as soon as you tell kids like, okay, you don't have to do anything specifically, I'm not going to force you, there's nothing that's, often what happens is test that out, you know, or they just feel this huge sense of relief of like, really, I don't have this mountain of homework every day, and I don't have to go to all these classes I don't think are valuable, and so they binge on, like, they'll like sit on their phone at Northstar for a week or two, and parents will watch that and they'll be like, these kids are doing nothing, you know? So, or like Heather was telling me, the one in Albany was saying that she was panicking about that too. And at first it was really hard, like, because the parents are going through the deschooling process also of saying like, but my job is to like crack the whip, is to keep them moving, you know? And suddenly, what am I supposed to do? And it's really easy, but that's a normal kind of process. You know, once kids get through, some of them really do have to go through that. Like, they have to waste some time, you know? And again, adults waste time all the time too, like, don't we? And so if we're going to say like, oh, these kids are just wasting all this time on social media, like, do any of us ever do that, you know? But be prepared for that. If you're going to dive into this or give it a try, like, kind of buckle in and be ready, because your kid might go through a time of testing out if you're serious about, like, do they really have autonomy or not? And they might test that out, and it might drive you crazy because it seems like they're doing nothing. And I think a lot of people find that they have to push through that before the kid will be like, okay, it's true, I really have, and this is my life, and what do I really want to do? And then they start taking themselves seriously too, and pursuing the things that they want to do. And that's what we want from our kids, right? Don't we want them to become people that are like, that know themselves and that want that are able to navigate the future? I think that those skills are way more important than much of the content we teach kids in school.
Sweet. Awesome. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I'm good. I think I've covered lots of things here. We've really gone through a lot here. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it so much. It's nice to hear a perspective of someone who has been a traditional teacher for 17 years and now like, oh my God, this is so awesome. And so thank you for sharing your journey. And definitely, you know, I hope you can share more in the self-directed group, because we'd love to hear more. And that's a group, the self-directed education group started in 2020. It was just me and a couple other spiritual parents. So more on like the meditation and coming from that aspect of, well, our children are actually equal souls. They're not lower or less than. Let's treat them as these brilliant, magnificent children who, why wouldn't we let them sleep if that's what they need? Or why wouldn't we let them, you know, be on their phone if that's what they're driven to? There's got to be some, you know, people who see value in inspiration and passion. So we started it, and I'll also have you know, and for other people listening, that this style of child-led education or student-led It's actually global. And some people, like over in Europe, they call it democratic. So where the children have a say. So it's being called different names, but this is a global style, which is so awesome. So yeah, people can join the group, and if you want to share more, especially once your blog is up, and then I'll connect with you after this just to get all the links straightened out.
Yeah.
But I hope that this conversation, it's been fun and exciting for me, so thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
And I hope it can also be a resource to other parents or educators. It's just, I love the name of the class you took, Another Way, because I think sometimes you're just like, there's so many flaws in the traditional system, not that it won't improve, and I'm sure it is improving. What is there a better way? What's that other way? And then you open up to this whole world of like, oh my God, there is, and it works, and it's beautiful. So
yeah. Well, thanks for your time. I enjoyed it.
awesome. All right. Well, we'll be seeing you in the group.
Alrighty.
All
Bye.
right. Thank you.